When it comes to living in Chicago, there are countless options for not only the size of your space, but the size and shape of your building. Starting in the late 1800s and continuing up until this day, people's tastes in dwellings are constantly evolving, and that is perhaps most evident in the architecture of Chicago. What's good, YouTube? It's Louis Gusto. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're in the Lakeview East neighborhood to check out the various types of apartment buildings available for rent in Chicago. We're gonna explore the area, see the buildings, and talk about what each of them brings to the table. But before we get started, you already know what to do. Go ahead and finesse that like button and subscribe if you're new to the channel for more videos about Chicago, travel, and lifestyle. Although new buildings pop up all the time, there is a ton of vintage housing in Chicago. You'll find a blend of old and new. Although the buildings may be old, the interiors have likely been renovated at least a couple of times. Many vintage apartments have wooden floors, though a fair amount do have a blend of carpet and linoleum. They also tend to have details that you would almost never find in newer units, like glass doorknobs, intricate woodwork, and retro radiators. This building may look ordinary, but it's anything but. It's actually a set of row houses. These types of buildings emerged as land values in Chicago began to skyrocket in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So families would split the cost of land, build a row house, and each one would get their own single family home. You're gonna find these types of buildings all over the city, and some of the pros include the classic architectural styles that you'll find the row houses in. You also get your own home insulated with brick walls and nobody up top or below. It's gonna feel a bit more quiet, a bit like your space, even if it's an apartment. Typically they are homes, but they are also available for rent. On the con side, they're gonna be a little bit older, may not have the newest amenities, and you may have to deal with your neighbors a little bit more than you'd like to because it's a more intimate type of building. So depending on your lifestyle. But regardless, row houses are one of the most popular types of residential buildings that you'll find all over Chicago. Vintage mid-rise apartment buildings are also super common throughout Chicago, but these types of buildings weren't really popular until around the 1920s because many people still looked at apartment dwelling as something that only the less fortunate classes did. So architects and real estate developers had to get creative. They made these buildings beautiful, gave them the latest amenities of the time like super big lobbies, elegant architectural details, and many of them started off as apartment hotels, which combined the services of a hotel with the convenience and lower cost of living of apartments. Many of these buildings are among the most beautiful that you'll find in the city, especially the pre-war ones. We're standing in front of a vintage mansion on Oakdale, and the first thought running through your head might be, wait a second, Louis, that's not an apartment building. Well, it actually might be. Many vintage mansions around the city have actually been converted into apartment buildings. This is nothing new. A lot of the mansions on Prairie Avenue, once the wealthy families moved out, they were converted into boarding rooms. And this kind of continues even to this day. Even the mansions that haven't been converted may have a family that's renting out the attic or the basement. That's what we like to call a garden apartment. Some of the pros of living in a vintage mansion are that you're dealing with the family most of the time, so you may cut a break on the rent. There's gonna be less people around, so potentially less noise. And also, these vintage mansions are pretty beautiful, and there's something to be said about living in a home that's this lovely. Some of the cons about living in a converted mansion are you're not gonna have as many neighbors, you're definitely not gonna have modern amenities that you'd find in an apartment building, and let's face it, living in a basement is typically not people's first choice. So even though it's somewhat atypical, apartment living in a mansion is definitely something that you can find here in Chicago. The building at 444 West Diversey is a perfect example of a mixed-use building. The top 3 floors are apartments, where the ground floor is all businesses. You got a waxing spa, a dry cleaners, and several restaurants. You're gonna find these types of mixed-use buildings all over the city. Some of the pros are they're so unique. You're not gonna find these types of buildings in suburbs or small towns, pretty much exclusive to big cities like Chicago, New York City, Miami. Another one of these pros is that these businesses are located convenient to your home. So if you need to get your eyebrows waxed, drop some clothes off at the cleaners, or eat some of your favorite food, it's a simple walk downstairs. However, on the con side, these are usually located on busy streets like Diversey, commercial areas with a lot of traffic, cars and buses going all the time, lots of people walking in and out of your building. If you want a more quiet living experience, a mixed-use building may not be the way to go. Regardless, these types of buildings are integral to the community, and it's really nice to see them all around the city. Vintage high-rise apartment buildings are some of the coolest in Chicago. And when you think of high-rise apartment living, you tend to think of that as more of a modern modern phenomenon. But actually, these buildings started popping up in the 1920s, and they're gonna have beautiful architectural styles like Art Deco, Classical Revival, even Spanish Renaissance. When areas of the city like Lakeview were suburban getaways, these buildings were actually built as hotels. But as this area became part of the city, buildings like this were converted into apartment buildings. So they're gonna have all the amenities that you need for your modern apartment living, like elevators and lobbies. And because they were hotels, they have plenty of rooms on the bottom that have been converted into gyms and laundry rooms and even a reading room. So definitely vintage high-rise apartment living in Chicago is great. Some of them even have their rooftops converted into decks, so you can get a beautiful view of the city. And there's just something about getting to the top of a vintage high-rise building, being in that kind of old architecture, but still seeing this bird's eye view of the neighborhood. I can't really explain it, but if you know, you know. Courtyard apartment buildings are some of my favorite in the city, and they're pretty exclusive to Chicago. They're a U-shape, as you can see, with a courtyard or a park or garden in the middle. It kind of feels like your own private nature sanctuary. These types of buildings are great because you're not gonna have neighbors on the side of you, only above or below. You're gonna get a cross breeze, you're gonna get natural light from 3 different directions, but these buildings are pretty vintage. They don't build them like this anymore, literally. They're not gonna be taller than 4 stories because of elevator and fireproof material laws. Courtyard apartment buildings are super dope, and these are buildings that you should definitely consider during your apartment search in Chicago. Now, you guys already know that I love my vintage buildings in Chicago, but if I'm gonna do a video on the types of apartment buildings available for rent in the city, I can't leave out the luxury high-rises. This one on Oakdale and Sheridan is somewhat of a rarity because you're typically not gonna find brand new luxury high-rise apartment buildings in a vintage neighborhood like Lakeview East. You typically find them in South Loop, in River North, in the downtown area like the Loop and Streeterville. So this one's a little bit of a rarity. They're gonna be on the pricier side. That's one of the big cons. Another con is the floor to ceiling windows. It's nice for the views, but on a sunny day, you're gonna be feeling like you're in a sauna. Another pro of living in a luxury high-rise apartment building are the amenities that's gonna come along with it. A door person, a nice lobby, a gym, a laundry room, other services like even restaurants. Architecturally speaking, they're usually not the most exciting, but you will find some nice designs here and there, and that's always nice because you want to keep the tradition of Chicago architecture alive. Now, if this is the type of apartment that you're looking for, you're definitely in luck because these buildings are all over the city and new ones are being constructed even through the pandemic. So if living in a skyscraper is your thing, definitely check out some of these luxury buildings. I also have to mention conversions. These buildings were once factories, warehouses, or state-of-the-art office buildings. Again, they're pretty unique to big cities with industrial eras. Throughout the 20th century, companies moved out of these buildings and they were left vacant until being converted into apartments or condos. You'll find these in former industrial corridors of Chicago like South Loop, West Loop, and Printers Row. Flats buildings are possibly the most common types of Chicago apartment buildings. And like a lot of the other buildings we've seen, many didn't start as apartments, but rather single-family homes stacked on top of each other. They're named by the amount of floors that they have. So 2 flats, 3 flats, even 6 flats. Unlike some of the other buildings that we've talked about in this video, they're still being built even to this day. Although I gotta say, some of the newer ones aren't nearly as creative with the architectural details. Some of the pros of living in a flats building are having a bigger unit. Typically, it's gonna go from the front of the building all the way to the back. You may have a backyard, you may have laundry unit, you may have exposed brick. A couple of the cons of living in a building like this include hearing your neighbors above and below, whether that be squeaky and creaky floors or bass or shouting. Also, you're not gonna have any amenities. You're not gonna have a door person, package service. You may have a laundry room if you're lucky, but a lot of times you'll have to go to the laundromat or dry cleaners. In the comments below, let me know your favorite type of Chicago apartment building. Also, let me know some of the ones that you've lived in previously. Remember to finesse that like button and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Hit that notification bell like it was Big Ben. Thank you so much for watching. We are out of here. Peace. It's a set of row houses, which is one big building subdivided into narrow houses. This type of building, my bad. Yeah. I don't need to explain every detail about what it is, but we'll go and then, okay. And don't be fooled by the new construction. Sometimes even in a luxury, brand new high-rise building, you're gonna hear your neighbors because they still just don't know how to work insulation into these apartments. It was only later that they started renting them as apartments or even allowed them to be purchased. Whatever. I went off the rails there. This is what happens when you film in the city. It's just mad loud sometimes. What is this? This This is the garbage truck. See, this is an essential service, so I'm definitely not mad about it, but homeboy's got a TV in his garbage truck. I haven't seen that one before. Oh, is this Sheridan, right? It's Sheridan, right? This is Sheridan? Sheridan, and, well, this is Oakdale, but that's Sheridan, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm 99% sure. Okay.